All right, so I think that is going to be at least a good start because I want to get moving along. So real quick, for those of you that are in attendance, just letting you know this is being recorded. A recording will be posted later on social media. We will be utilizing the raise your hand feature. If you open the participants area, it should appear to the side of your screen where you can actually hit raise hand, and then we'll know if you want to ask a question where we can unmute you and you can use the microphone to ask your question. However, you can use the Q&A feature, which is going to be at the bottom of your screen. When you go down there, you'll be able to see Q&A. When you activate that, you can type out your question. And for those of you that are putting in questions, others can check off upvote, which is a like button, whether you like that question or not, to give it more votes, which will help us understand where we should go to when it comes to our questions. We will allow attendees up to 4 questions this evening to the candidates since we're limited in time. And candidates will be unmuted when it's their turn and will be going in alphabetical order. There will also be a poll at the end of this event, so we can kind of gauge where everyone is right now as far as their candidate of choice if the election was held today. Outside of that, I'm going to now hand this over to Brandon Nelson, President of the Rainbow Democrats.
Good evening, everybody, and welcome to the second of the guest speaker series. What this is going to be a debate style format between the sheriff's candidates for Orange County Sheriff. Those candidates are Andrew Darling, Darryl Sheppard, Eric Mcintyre, Joe Lopez, and incumbent Sheriff John Mina. Each candidate will have an introductory statement of 1 minute, and they will have 1 minute to respond to questions that are asked, as well as a 30-second rebuttal. Both our Vice President Matthew Inman and our Treasurer Jack Meek will be facilitating with the timing and making sure that candidates don't go over on time. With that being said, I will hand off introductions to Andrew Darling.
Hey, so first, thank you, Brandon. Matthew, thanks for putting this together and making sure this happened. I want to start by just saying my name is Andrew Darling. I am an attorney. I am a combat veteran. I am a leader, and my entire platform is based on criminal justice reform. So I know we've talked a lot in the last couple months. I know all of us as candidates. I know Sheriff Mina as sheriff and other police leaders have talked a lot about the criminal justice system. And I believe at this point, our country is at an inflection point where it is time for real and sustainable change and real and sustainable policy change. I do not believe that a career law enforcement officer is going to have the incentives to do that. I am not a career law enforcement officer. While being a law enforcement officer is absolutely an honorable profession, I think our system is so incredibly broken in this country that it's going to take somebody from the outside to come in and change it. And that is what I offer, treating kids like kids, offering 100% of eligible youth alternatives to arrest instead of arresting them, non-arrest for misdemeanors, not including domestic violence, and installing a civilian review board that actually has teeth to include subpoena power. So again, my name is Andrew Darling, and we will have more conversation as we go.
Okay. Next candidate is going to be Joe Lopez.
Hello, I want to thank the Rainbow Democrats for putting on this event, a great opportunity for us to share what our platforms are. So my name is Joe Lopez. I am the son of 2 Cuban immigrants. I was born and raised in the Bronx. Many people will tell you what they're going to do. We all know what defines a person is their achievements, what they've done in their career. For the 45 plus years, I have been involved in the community. I'm a retired chief with the Florida Highway Patrol. I retired 3 years ago. Prior to that, I was a United States Marine. I was a Boy Scout. I was a Cub Scout. I was a junior naval cadet, and I was an altar boy growing up in the Bronx. Serving my community is a calling. It's a sense of duty. I've served my nation, so now I also serve my state, so now it's time for me to serve my community. Violent crime is skyrocketing, and it's time that we take community back. That is why my platform is to reduce the violent crime that takes things off the streets. and also my number one.
Thank you, Joe. All right. Our next candidate we're going to hear from is going to be Incumbent Sheriff John Mina.
Priority is the community.
Hey, thank you to the Rainbow Democrats and Brandon and Matthew. Really appreciate it. So I am Sheriff John Mina. I'm the current sheriff here in Orange County. I was elected by the Orange County voters to be your sheriff in November of 2018. So I've been here a little over a year and a half. And during that time, we've been able to put more deputies out on the street, put more leadership out on the street, and reduce crime. Crime was reduced my first year by 1% and is down by 9% this year. So prior to me being the sheriff, I was the chief in the Orlando Police Department, and I spent 28 years there. Prior to that, I served our country in the United States Army. So I have been serving this country and our community for 30 years. I'm a 30-year resident of Orange County. This is the community that I chose to raise my family and my boys in. I care deeply about it. I have built relationships within our community over the past 30 years, and those relationships have helped me be successful in the two largest law enforcement agencies in Central Florida. I am endorsed by all three U.S. congressional representatives, Val Demings, Stephanie Murphy, and Darren Soto. I'm also endorsed by Mayor Dyer and Mayor Demings, along with 9 other Central Florida mayors. And I look forward to continuing my time here as Orange County Sheriff. We have lots of work ahead of us.
Thank you, Sheriff Mina. Okay, excuse me. We are going to get into the question portion of the debate. Right now, we have 3 out of the 5 candidates who are in attendance, so we're going to go ahead and go straight forward to the questions. We also may have 2 questions from our co-sponsors, the Orange County Democratic Black Caucus and the Orange County Young Democrats as well. This question is going to come directly from the Rainbow Democrats Caucus. What would you do to ensure that deputies are properly trained regarding LGBTQ sensitivity, including domestic issues, and especially regarding racial minorities within the LGBTQ community? Response, Andrew Darling.
You breaking up a little bit on that, so I want to just make sure I understand the question properly. It's how do we make sure that our deputies are trained and sort of culturally competent with LGBTQ issues? Is that the question?
Yes.
Okay. So cultural competence is a huge part of it. I know that our sheriff has done some things, including working with local businesses to do some safe spaces for LGBTQ individuals in the event that they're having any issues, allowing places for the community to go and be in a safe space and be protected. I think we continue that. I think we have to have LGBTQ competence training for our deputies, and those need to be put on by members of the LGBTQ community. I also would like to point out, to the best of my knowledge, I am the only dues-paying member of the Rainbow Democrats at this time, and I have been for some time since it relaunched and reformed last year. So my commitment to the LGBTQ community is there. It is going to be something that continues as far as continuing to build a relationship. But making sure cultural competence is going to be the first step that you do, and then continuing to have that training every year. And having it taught by somebody who's a member of the community.
All right. Next response is going to go to Joe Lopez.
Or understand the LGBTQ community, including what the letters mean, because most often, a lot, what happens is the T is silent for some people in the transgender. And why do I talk about that? Because we saw what happened in 2018 with Sasha Gardner, who was murdered and was misidentified as a male, which she was a transgender woman. So that was very important, and it took so much work to get, because the media reported it in the news, and then they say they're not going to change it because the sheriff's office had it identified that way. They couldn't change it. So it took 6 hours for them to change the report so they can identify the transgender woman properly, and that way they can do it. So why is that important? Is because a lot of people don't know. We need to educate them, and we need to make sure that, just like everything else, is when we're learning how to be around other cultures, Hispanics, whether African Americans, let's take them to the community. We need to go to the LGBTQ community and also ask them to help us to understand what their concerns and what their needs are, and to continue the diversity training.
Thank you, Joe. I just saw that Darryl Sheppard just joined us, so I'm going to allow Darryl Sheppard to respond to the question. The question again is, what would you do to ensure that deputies are properly trained regarding LGBTQ sensitivity, including domestic issues, and especially regarding racial minorities within the LGBTQ community?
Brandon, Darryl's still connecting his audio and his video is not working yet. So while Darryl works that out, let's keep moving along to keep the pace.
Okay, no worries. In that case, we're going to move on to Sheriff Mina.
Huge supporter of our LGBTQ community here in Orlando. Going back to my time as chief, I was the one who adopted the LGBTQ liaison program there. Under my leadership, we as an organization participated in our first Pride Parade. We also implemented the first ever interactions with transgender personnel policy and training at the Orlando Police Department. And then, of course, as Andrew mentioned, I developed the Safe Place Initiative. So when I got to the Orange County Sheriff's Office as sheriff, I saw the need for more liaisons. They only had one liaison. They're a 2,500 member organization. So I expanded the liaison program. I put a lieutenant, a manager in charge of that program, and brought the same things to all of Orange County that I did in the city of Orlando, including the transgender interaction policy and training. And I'm also funding training for the Gay Officers Action League of Central Florida to provide that training to all Central Florida law enforcement. And again, this was the first time that the Orange County Sheriff's Office under my leadership had participated as an organization in the Pride Parade. It's something that's extremely important to me, and I have a proven track record. I've received 2 LGBTQ ally awards, one from the Florida Diversity Council and one
from Sheriff Mina.
Orlando.
Do we know if, I just saw that Eric Mcintyre was able to join us as well. Do we know if either Eric Mcintyre or Darryl Sheppard, his audio was working?
Eric's up and running, so Eric can do his statement. I'll ask him to unmute.
Okay.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes.
Hello?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, great. Am I introducing myself now? Okay, I'm Eric Mcintyre. I was a candidate for Orange County Sheriff. And I've lived and worked in the community of downtown Orlando. I was pretty much raised in the inner city, and I am familiar with law enforcement and the tactics of law enforcement. I've been a law enforcement officer and worked in the legal field for over 25 years. And what I'm bringing to the table is my experience dealing with various areas of law enforcement, to include but not limited to my experience working in criminal investigations, working with TAC teams, and dealing with tactical operations. And as well as I also bring a myriad of supervisory experience. And over the years, I've been able to work with the community and bring forth community policing, where people know my name and they know the names of other officers within the neighborhood. That brings about an engagement of officers where the community can say, hey, they're more likely to speak to you about solving crimes and seriously simply remain anonymous. And I'm in this race because there's been an overwhelming number of homicides within certain neighborhoods that I believe that my running would help impact those homicides, as well as curb a lot of domestic violence that's going on. And the domestic violence parts of it is—
Thank you, Eric. We're going to give an opportunity also to answer the question that we had just posed to the other candidates as well. You're going to have a 1 minute response to the question. It is, what would you do to ensure that deputies are properly trained regarding LGBTQ sensitivity, including domestic issues, and especially regarding racial minorities within the LGBTQ community?
Well, what would be interesting would be if persons from the community and from the LG community will come out and speak with officers to give them an experience of what they're experiencing. No one can walk a mile in someone's shoes, but they can hear about their travels. In this particular case, training will help solve a lot of these issues that's going on, and inform and educate, because a lot of officers do not know the different gender-based things that's going on within the community, and how there's abuse and how they're being mistreated, and they need to learn diversity, and diversity training would be foremost on my list as far as uniting the community.
Okay, thank you. Matthew, can you see if Darryl Sheppard's microphone is working?
No, he has not connected successfully, so we're just going to keep going.
Okay, no worries. I do see that we have a question from the panelists, from the participants, I'm sorry. This question comes from Sammy Connie. What are you going to do to address the fact that Orlando has the 4th highest rate of police violence against civilians in the country, which happens to more seriously impact communities of color and LGBTQ+ and people of color? First response is going to go to Andrew Darling.
Yeah, so the first thing I'm going to do is it's a very nuanced legal strategy. So the controlling case in the state of Florida that talks about the Police Officer Bill of Rights is Demings versus the Civilian Review Board. It's from when Mayor Demings was the sheriff, and that was his position. The case was decided in the Florida Supreme Court. I am going to fundamentally change the position of the sheriff's office on that. And I am going to change my position that a civilian oversight board should have subpoena power and should be able to investigate or compel officers to at least come to the meeting. Now, obviously, they still have their same constitutional protections. They don't have to, speak on something that may incriminate themselves. Those are the same due process rights that everybody else is entitled to. And I want the Civilian Review Board to actually have oversight and actually have teeth. Right now, because of that current state law, well, the state law, as well as what the Supreme Court's decision on that state law have said, is that civilian oversight does not have subpoena power to officers. And I think that's the first step if we're going to bring the communities together.
Thank you, Andrew. Next response is going to come from Eric Mcintyre.
As for, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. As far as the abuse that's occurring within our communities, so many of those abuse cases has to be reviewed based on training. And if we train law enforcement officers in a special way, the way you train is the way you perform. That's when I went to the academy back in many years ago, over 20-something years ago. I went to the academy. They say the way you train is the way you perform. And if we utilize more training, we will minimize the overall, I would say, violence that's occurring. And that's just what we need, whether it's human diversity, and people have to know how other cultures act, and they can't personalize these things. And then the other part is, once you have more training, you will be familiar with your tactics and how to handle a certain situation. So only thing that really can happen is to make things work is training. And just to touch on one thing about the citizen review boards and subpoenas, only the facts has to be in a case. Emotions shouldn't be put in a case. And citizen review board and subpoena power, my view is always and will always be, they can look at it before discipline is rendered. and offer an opinion, as opposed.
Okay. Next question response is going to go to Joe Lopez.
Yeah, unfortunately, whenever there's excessive use of force or police brutality, when people from the minority communities are brutalized, it gives everybody a bad name. You know, the sheriff, when he was the chief of OPD, he had to pay out $3.2 million in excessive use of force cases and false arrest. What we know is under his tenure, there were 33 police shootings, and out of those 33, 22 were Black. So just recently, they just settled a $96,000 settlement when Chief Mina was the OPD chief in 2015, and they just settled for Noel Carter for another excessive use of force. So one of the things that we need to do, right? We need to not decriminalize, we need to not be enforcing low-level crimes. Why? Because we know when people are arrested for low-level crimes, they don't go to jail. So why are we sending them to jail? Why are we arresting them? So those low-level crimes, whether it's possession of paraphernalia or whether it's a joint or something like that, we should be giving a citation or notice to appear. So that's one of the things. And to also to stop our officers, our deputies from doing foot pursuit chases for these low-level crimes, because we know that that's the most incidents that we have interaction with police brutality.
Okay. Sheriff Mina, would you like to respond?
Yeah, absolutely. So, you know, those deadly force cases that the other opponent is talking about. Look, one of the things I did to be remain open and transparent, only a handful of law enforcement agencies in the country do this. I post every single one of our officer-involved shootings, and now I do it at the Orange County Sheriff's Office online. So all of those deadly force encounters, which were investigated by the independent third party, the Florida Department of Law Enforcement, who then turned those cases over to the state attorney's office. All those cases were cleared by the state attorney's office, all except one, the one that we actually charged an officer. So we have a good system here in Central Florida where we have an independent agency conducting investigations, then it's turned over to the state attorney's office for criminal review. Further, the measures that I've put in place, de-escalation training, simulation training, which we use a lot at agencies I was a part of, to de-escalate situations, decision-based situations, so that the officer, the deputy, can act in real time and make those decisions, and then putting tough policies in place. And I discipline at both agencies and have terminated numerous officers and deputies for excessive force violations. And I've also instituted a Citizens Advisory Council at the Sheriff's Office.
Okay, thank you, Sheriff Mina. Let's see. We're going to go ahead and move on to another question coming. Oh, okay. I'm sorry. Sheriff Mina. Also, would you like to answer the question as well?
I'm sorry.
The question that was posed by Sammy Condi, would you like to respond as well?
Yeah, so I will continue to speak. So, you know, at the Orange County Sheriff's Office, I'm in the process of reviewing our policy based on ideas and suggestions from the community as a result of the George Floyd incident 15 states away, but it does affect us here. And so what I've done, I've taken all the suggestions, I've given to my Citizens Advisory Council, and the good news is that many of those suggestions, like the duty to intervene, the banning of chokeholds, and other policies are already incorporated into our training, our philosophy, into our policy. Certainly, there's always room for improvement, and that's why I talk about the simulation training, the increased de-escalation training, and also, since I've been sheriff, the increased discipline specifically for those cases involving excessive force.
Okay, thank you. So our next question is going to be another question from the Rainbow Democrats Caucus. The question is, what kind of gun safety measures do you support or would you take to ensure that they don't end up in the possession of those who would do us harm? First to respond, Andrew Darling.
So I think that we need to take steps to ensure that the pawn shops, gun shops, and such are maintaining security on their weapons. That is something that I thought a lot about. I do actually support Sheriff Mina's position on that. I do think that pawn shops and firearm owners need to make sure that their devices are secure, particularly if they're in a retail establishment. The other thing that we need to do is we need to make sure we have comprehensive background checks, not just on in-store purchases, but in private gun sales as well. Because you can have somebody purchase a gun from a friend, and then 2 or 3 resales later, you have no idea how it got to where it was. So making sure that, we're utilizing tracking systems that I know law enforcement has in place to track weapons as well as ballistics, to make sure you can try to identify it in any other prior crimes. Those are things that we can do. I own a firearm. If I can ever find a place to do my fingerprints, I will also have a concealed carry permit. So it is something that I am very familiar with. During my time in the military, I actually trained people on how to fire weapons. And I do think that training is a large part of it. I think that we should have a similar process to when you purchase a new vehicle, you go through training for that vehicle. Same thing with firearms.
Thank you, Andrew. Next to respond, Eric Mcintyre. Hold on 1 second. Eric, 1 second. You're muted. Okay. You're unmuted. Sorry.
Okay. Guns can get in the hands of the wrong people at any time on the streets. Legally, we make every effort to make sure that persons that are incompetent do not have firearms. We make sure through court orders that persons involved with domestic violence are not given firearms. As far as having it in the wrong hands, that has a lot to do with street patrol and has a lot to do with just making contact with citizens and people in the community in hopes that it do not fall in the hands of a child or some other non-law-abiding citizen. And that's basically how that works. Any other legislation, basically we have it unless you're increasing penalties for possession of a firearm and making it a minimum mandatory or something to that effect.
Thank you, Eric. I do see that Darryl Sheppard looks like his audio is working. Darryl, can you hear us?
Yes, I can.
Okay. I want to go ahead and give you a chance to introduce yourself 1 minute, and then we're going to give you a 1 minute response to the question as well.
Okay. My name is Darryl Sheppard, of course, as most of you may know. I am running for Orange County Sheriff. I am the youngest candidate in the race, and I believe that I can change and take us into a new direction. I was born and raised here in Florida all my life. I've been a businessman in Orlando for over 15 years, and I have what it takes. I was a Democratic nominee in the previous race. We came so close to getting it done, given the situation and the events on the ground today. I think you have to have someone that's young, that is not part of the good old boy club or the blue curtain, and that's the only way that we're going to be able to lead ourselves out of the problems we face today.
Okay, thank you, Darryl. And were you able to hear the question, or would you like me to repeat the question?
Yeah, I didn't get the question. I'm sorry.
Okay, the question is, what kind of gun safety measures do you support, or would you take to ensure that they don't end up in the possession of those who would do us harm? 1 minute response.
Well, I think obviously background checks are very important, and enforcing the laws that we have on the books. We have the gun show loopholes that we continuously face every day. Clearly, people who have felony convictions are not allowed to own a weapon, and we need to make sure that we enforce that. However, I think we also need to take some self-responsibility especially with our children and in our households. We have to lock up our guns, especially if you know that you have children in the household or other people that may have access to those guns. I think you also need to have better training for people who do buy guns. It shouldn't be just a situation where you can just go into a gun store, buy a gun, and then, you know, not be trained on the proper ways to maintain it, to keep it, to lock it up. Then also think that we should look at mental health. If people are showing signs that they may be at risk for certain violent behaviors, then we need to make sure that they get treatment and they're able to get done.
Thank you, Darryl. Next response is going to go to Joe Lopez.
Yeah, unfortunately, we have too much gun violence going on here in Orange County. The homicides already are up 50% this year. They're at 47 homicides for this year alone. Year to date for 2020, the same time last year, there were 30 homicides. In the last 3 days, we have 4 homicides. So yes, gun violence is going up, and so we need to talk about more of that. One of the things that we need to do is to make sure that, I also agree about the pawn shop and the gun shops. If there was a problem down in South Florida years ago, same thing, and they were taking trucks and they were smashing into the gun shops and they were stealing the guns. Who was stealing the guns? Gangs. So we know that because it was the same MO and so forth. So we need to work better with the pawn shops, you know, in prevention and sometimes intervention. One of the things that we need to do is that we got to use technology. We got to leverage technology. And there's a technology out there called ShotSpotter. What is that? It detects gunfire. A triangulation of detecting the gunfire when gunfire goes off, because we know that 80% of gunfire doesn't get reported. Why is that important? Because we need to respond quickly.
Thank you, Joe. Next is Sheriff Mina.
I'll tell you about some of my beliefs and some of the things I have done. Yes, it was under my direction that we presented legislation to Representative Joy Goff-Marcil and Senator Victor Torres to present to the legislature to get gun shops, pawn shops to lock up their guns. People were just breaking the front glass of a pawn shop or a gun shop and taking 30 and 50 firearms at a time. Unfortunately, that never even got out of committee, which is unfortunate. But I was also very supportive of red flag laws, something that we have used in this community over and over again to ensure that we're taking guns out of the hands of people who have threatened to or have committed violence against themselves or others. The other thing that I have done is I work very closely with the U.S. Attorney's Office here in Central Florida to go after the worst of the worst and those folks who are committing serious crimes with firearms. And the other thing I will say is that, you know, since 1994, the International Association of Chiefs of Police has agreed that there should be a ban on assault weapons, and I am in agreement with that. And so if I could have 30 seconds to respond to some of Joe Lopez's comments about the crime in Orange County.
Yes.
So in the 47 homicides, he's not aware of a number of justified homicides and a number of other homicides that don't count towards that number. So I will say that, you know, ShotSpotter is, yes, it's good technology. That piece of equipment, we've looked at it here in Orange County, and it's millions and millions and millions of dollars for just one square block. So we're going to invest that in personnel as our county continues to grow, and it's not a perfect system. And I will say that, again, crime is down here in Orange County by 9%. A number of those homicides happen behind doors and really out of the hands of our deputies.
Thank you, Sheriff Mina. Joe, would you like to respond?
Yeah, absolutely. What Sheriff Mina does, again, as he misleads the community, overall crime, he talks about that, but the homicides continue to rise. We're at 50%. We just had four homicides. And he wants to use the excuse that we can't control what happens behind closed doors. Is that what you tell the domestic violence of the 4 children that were killed in the domestic violence while you were the chief of OPD, that we can't control what's going on inside? Is that what you tell when you never responded, you never looked after to see what really happened and mislead the media about those 4 kids dying? That's not a good answer. When somebody dies, that's one too many lives. Even if it's domestic violence, it's not excusable.
Okay. Thank you, Joe. I'm going to give Sheriff Mina an opportunity to respond.
Homicide is one homicide too many. And again, you know, our deputies and officers can't be held responsible for what's happening behind closed doors. You know, we had a homicide earlier this year where an ICE agent killed his entire family and then himself. And so that's very hard. I work very closely with Harbor House of Central Florida, and domestic violence is one of our top priorities here. And it is an increasing issue that we have here in Orange County. We continue to fight it, but again, you know, it's very hard for us to do to find out what's happening behind closed doors. And I would just say that the men and women in the Orange County Sheriff's Office work extremely hard. And if the homicides can be solved, they solve them. They have extremely high solved homicides, and we have prevented and stopped numerous violent crimes here in Orange County. So very, very proud of the men and women of the Orange County Sheriff's Office.
Thank you, Sheriff Mina. We do have another question coming from the attendee side. This question is from Rob Curry. In recent interviews, some people have suggested police departments could reduce spending on expensive equipment and reallocate money to other services. Do you think this is an option for Orange County? Andrew Darling.
Yes, I do. So my understanding is that the Sheriff's Office has two basically MRAP vehicles, which are one of them is an older model. The other one is a newer model. My understanding is it has better air conditioning. So yes, I would move to demilitarize the police. So I understand that here in Orange County, we have unique needs in that we are a potential terrorist threat. We have theme parks, we have financial institutions, we have a very large economy here, and we don't want to put ourselves in a position where we cannot react to those threats. But at the same time, our main goal is to keep the community safe. And whether we talk about it or not, policing is a service job. Policing is in the service industry. You are at service to the community. And yes, that does involve sometimes putting yourself at risk, but we do not need to have an MRAP to respond to just any force. If we have it, one of them should be sufficient. And some of the other tools that some of our special operators have, they work great once or twice a year. They do phenomenal for training. But I think a lot of that budget, if we could solve some of our social issues and put more money into that, I think that would be a better use of our resources.
Okay. Thank you, Andrew. Darryl Sheppard. Darryl, hold on 1 second. You are muted.
Got you. Is that
okay? We can hear you now.
Okay. So yeah, I definitely think that we should be using, as Andrew stated, those funds for better use in putting it into our community, especially with the LGBTQ communities. We have issues with transgender rights, as well as other things that are much more important and I think much more effective than, giving our officers, 5 Bearcats. Yes, those are situations, SWAT kinds of situations that we'll deal with on a basis that those things are needed, but not so much. And as you see with the things that are going on today, the aggressive force only brings out more aggression. So getting the mental health services that the community needs, getting other services such as healthcare, getting some economic support to some of these families, I think that's going to be more effective in fighting crime, giving them, productive ways to be contributing members of society instead of labeling them as criminals and then thus having to militarize our police in order to handle law enforcement situations. So I think there's many ways that the sheriff can control the budget and take that money and give it back to the community that we serve.
Thank you, Darryl. Eric?
Training is very important, and to demilitarize only moderately. We need certain equipment in order to effect certain arrests. If we do not have certain equipment, there are some people that don't kindly want to come out of the building. You take the nightclub or the Post, and had armored vehicles not played a role, we might not have been able to pull our wall out. Given the totality of the circumstances, demilitarization, actually, I'm hoping it's moderately. And I believe that much of the spending can be allotted to training, and training can go in various ways. Training people how to deal with communities, training officers how to be more diverse. And if we can balance that out, that would be a great asset. However, I'm not saying military vehicles and necessarily military equipment is a no-no. I'm saying it's necessary that we need to be prepared to take on the weaponry that other people have out there in the streets.
Thank you, Eric. Joe?
Yeah, we need to be very cautious. So, how we spend money for budgets. We do know that Orlando is always being looked at, Orange County being looked at. For terrorist activity, we had the second worst terrorist activity here happened in Orange County, where we lost 49 people. But whenever you have a large department like Orange County Sheriff's Office, or even where I came from the Florida Highway Patrol, as it grows, there's waste. So when I go in, one of the things I'm going to do is I'm going to do an audit from top to bottom and do an audit to find out to see, what we can get rid of, what waste, where we can save money, and we can use technology better and hire smarter people.
Thank you. Sheriff Mina?
So I'm the only candidate here who's been in charge of a $266 million budget. And I will say, I gave $2 million back to Orange County government last year. Unfortunately, those social services, homelessness, drug and alcohol abuse, mental health, we're talking about tens and even hundreds of millions of dollars. The only way to get those funds is to cut personnel. And as our county continues to grow, we need more deputies, not less. Every single day, I get emails and phone calls about people wanting more deputies in their neighborhoods, and I'm working towards that goal. We have 1,500 people a week moving to Central Florida. As far as the MRAP, we do have one. It was acquired for free by the military, and we only use that vehicle in response to hurricanes. So it's able to go through large flooded roadways. It's able to go through over downed trees. And again, when I was chief of police in Orlando, we used our armored vehicle to save dozens and dozens of lives at the Pulse nightclub after that horrific event, and mostly LGBTQ lives. And I just thank goodness for the mayor at the time, Mayor Buddy Dyer, city commissioners, who authorized the purchase of that. Had it not been for that vehicle, more lives would have been lost. And when people talk about armored vehicle, that's just a vehicle to ensure that the people inside don't get shot. So we need it for safety. We are a threat here in Orlando. And I promise, as I have done while I was chief, and as I will have done as I'm sheriff, is be very fiscally responsible with our money. When we do have available funds to give back because of attrition, yes, certainly those will go back. And like I said, I gave $2 million back to Orange County government last year that could have been used for many of those services.
Okay, thank you, Sheriff Mina. We have another question coming in from the attendee. This one is from Lavetta Henry. How do you plan to have Orange County Sheriff Office deputies positively engage minority communities? Andrew?
Yeah, so I think that starts with actually having equal justice in every community. And what that means is that probable cause is not different in Pine Hills than it is in Winter Garden, than it is in Winter Park, than it is in Windermere. So I think we have to start there. And what I mean by that is, let's stop pulling people over and using an excuse to engage with a member of the community that they have a bicycle that doesn't have a headlight or a tail light that can be visible from 500 or 800 feet. There are plenty of folks out here in Winter Garden that ride around on their bike, looking kind of like Lance Armstrong with their spandex and such. And I've never seen them get pulled over. And they're out at dawn and they're out at dusk. But I have had clients who have been pulled over in Pine Hills, and the only reason they were on a bike is because they were doing the right thing because they had a suspended license. So stop using baseline and borderline citation violations for crosswalk violations or stuff like that to initiate a stop when you're fishing to try and find something on somebody. That's where you start. That's how you engage communities.
Thank you, Andrew. Darryl? Darryl, you're muted if you're responding.
Sorry, sorry about that. This computer is acting funny today. But no, I think that as far as African Americans, I'm an African American, of course. Dealing with us, I think that you need to have police officers that are in the community, going door to door. I think a lot of us see police officers park in a parking lot somewhere chatting and other things throughout the day. I think we can better use their time actually going door to door to people's houses, developing relationships with the people that they serve, and therefore they're going to be a lot more cooperative with the police where we don't have to use aggressive force. Also being probably the only member of the LGBTQ community at running for sheriff, I have a lot of friends and close people who are part of the transgender community and tell me all kinds of stories about how they're treated differently, how they're called by their male name when they make reports on crimes, and all kind of other judgment that's associated with that. So I think that just goes to a basic level of respect with the people that you're dealing with in the community. So if we can establish or reestablish the respect given to the citizens and change this mentality of, the police are there to be served versus they're there to serve. And I think that'll go a long way.
Thank you, Darryl. Eric?
Eric, you need to unmute yourself.
Okay. Orange County is a diverse community, and with the disparities among the different communities, some communities are more suitable for training, and then there's other communities that we would overlook some things. It all depends on maybe the investigative nature of a stop. It's not as if it's a disproportionate number of people that's being harassed. It's sometimes if your brake lights out, you might be getting a warning. But other than that, I don't think officers are stopping people necessarily for infractions or something that do not exist. And if it does occur more often in some neighborhoods, then they would use discretion, because sometimes officers are looking for the bad guy. And if other areas, I would hope that there would be an equal amount of stops regardless of what neighborhood it is. And that goes back to training. And when you have more training, then you're going to have better officers.
Joe?
Yeah, that's a great question. We know that Orange County is a great place to live because we have 1,500 people moving here every week. And that's people from Puerto Rico, people from Miami, Venezuela, New York. There's 400,000 Hispanics living here. There are 38% of the population. The African Americans are 20% of the population. So what does that tell you? That more than half of the county is all full of minorities. You have Haitians, you got Brazilians. So it's very incumbent of us to make sure that we embrace the community that we have. So the sheriff's office needs to reflect that community. Also, we need to go as a Hispanic. I understand that we have different cultures, so we have to understand to make sure that we put officers and deputies in those neighborhoods that they understand the culture, including getting them involved, including bringing back midnight basketball. Right now, all we're doing is the police is right now, all they're doing is going into the neighborhoods to make arrests. We need to go to the neighborhoods and the communities and let them know that we're there to stay, that they know the name of the deputies that patrol their areas, and that they're interacting with them on a more friendly basis. Midnight basketball, what they used to have, they don't have it anymore. So we need to embrace the community because this is growing very fast. This is another melting pot. This is the third largest melting pot, actually the second in Florida, coming from New York and coming from Miami. Now Orlando, I understand what it is to have those relationships.
Sheriff Mina?
Strong history already of engaging with our community, especially those youth in our underserved populations. All one has to do is look on our social media posts when I was in the chief in Orlando and now as Orange County. We have a very good police athletically to engage with our youth. We continue to do our community barbecues, and even when those community barbecues, mostly in underserved populations, were stopped because of the COVID pandemic, I decided that, us, the sheriff's office, as a community, we were going to do a food drive for people in our community. So we fed over 600 families each and every holiday, especially around Christmas time. We're making sure that we're interacting with our youth, getting presents donated for those youth in our underserved populations. That's just so important for our youth to see us in non-enforcement type situations. So we have a strong history of doing that. We're going to continue to do that. The other thing I'll say is it's important to ensure that our agency is diverse. Today I heard 4 individuals, 2 Hispanics, 1 Haitian, and 1 female, extremely diverse group of people that we're going to bring on to Orange County. So it's all about getting out of our cars like we do, enforcing or having our deputies involved in those non-enforcement type situations, having conversations, playing basketball, a pickup game, which happens every single day in our county. So our deputies are doing a good job of that on top of fighting violent crime in our community.
Thank you, Sheriff Mina. We have another question coming in from Paul Chandler. Orange County will pay $4.82 million to the state of Florida to jail youth offenders in the 2019-2020 fiscal year. That covers just over 30,000 detention service days, which is the most in the state. Yet Orange County is the 5th largest county in population size. Miami-Dade County, the largest in population size, has over double our population, and yet has 79% of our amount of detention/service days and 79% of our payment to the state of Florida jail youth offenders. What will you do to prevent our highest rate in the state for detention service days and costs for jailing our youth? First response to Andrew.
Yeah, so I actually wrote a piece that was published in the Orlando Sentinel about this. In 2018, youth offenders who were eligible for an alternative to arrest. So these are crimes, mostly misdemeanors, all the way up to like youth domestic violence, which usually involves something between a youth and their parent, youth and a sibling, something of that nature. So in Pinellas County, 99% of all eligible youth offenders were issued an alternative to arrest. In Orange County in 2018, which was prior to Sheriff Mina, only 45% of our youth were given the alternatives to arrest, which means 55% of the youth who were eligible were arrested. In 2019, under Sheriff Mina's first full year, that number went down 10% to 35% of eligible youths. In June and July alone, 50 out of 52 eligible youth for an alternative to arrest were arrested. So one of the things that I'm going to do is I'm going to make it our policy that we are going to give 100% eligible youth the alternative to arrest that they are entitled to. And I am also going to not use our school resource officers as an extension of the Orange County Public Schools disciplinary system. If they want law enforcement to get involved and come arrest a child, they're going to need to reach out to the agency individually to do that outside of the school resource officer. So we need to give our kids every opportunity to be treated like kids and stop arresting them for common youthful behavior.
Thank you, Andrew. Darryl?
Yeah, I'm sorry. Can you repeat the question? It kind of came in and out, so I didn't get all of it.
Yes. What will you do to prevent our highest rate in the Sunshine State for detention service days and costs for jailing our youth?
Okay, well, I don't believe in jailing our youth as a matter of policy anyway, starting there. I do believe that, youth can be parts of all kinds of different environments when they're being raised. And I think that the parents have to take some responsibility for that. But in situations that may come up in our schools or elsewhere, I do believe, trying to get some counseling, putting more emphasis on our guidance counselors and other social services that will be more effective in helping our youth. I do not believe and strongly oppose labeling youth at an early age as criminals or introducing them to the criminal justice system, because what society does is then continue to reaffirm that label, and they continue to act out and have other problems as they get older, and they start to show more criminal behavior, or they become comfortable with the criminal justice system because they were introduced to it early on, and they begin to assimilate to some of those things. So I think that's a negative way to go. I think giving our kids a safe environment, making sure that these schools are safe is a job for the sheriff.
And Eric? Eric, you're muted.
Okay, that's a very simple and easy question. they brought about the civil citation program as well as the teen court. Many of those programs did work. And if there's misdemeanors, officers have discretion in misdemeanors. So if there is someone that's still being arrested for misdemeanors, they should examine the officer and the reason why that misdemeanor arrest was made, whether it's adult or youth. Being that we're talking about youth, if there's more officers in the community that knows the youth, they'll minimize a lot of those incarceration figures. If their crime is going high, that means there's not enough law enforcement programs that's in the neighborhood. And we probably need to pay attention and have programs where children can interact with law enforcement or recreational centers when grandmas are at work or mothers are working one or two or more jobs in order to make ends meet. And therefore, that would decriminalize a lot of these people and the youth. Yes. Thank you.
Joe?
This is a great question. Growing up in the Bronx, to a single parent, my mother worked 2 to 3 jobs where my sister and I, we had to fend for ourselves, but we stayed busy. I was a Boy Scout, Cub Scout, junior naval cadet, like I said it earlier, an altar boy, and we stayed busy and I lived in a crime-infested area. So it's the same thing needs to apply here. We can't do this alone. We shouldn't be arresting minors and youth for crimes where, like for instance, if they're in the schools and the officer gets summoned because of bad behavior, why are we getting summoned to do that? Why isn't the school taking discipline? I went to a Catholic school and the nuns took care of it. But we need to work with the organizations. We need to work with the community to get more programs. Unfortunately, the law enforcement aspect of it, we're limited in what we can do when it comes to funding with youth. We can do the youth programs involving the sports and everything, but we also need the private sector. We also need the faith-based communities, the non-charity organizations. There's a lot of groups out there that's willing to do something, and also leverage the county government and say, hey, do more programs for the youth, because if not, we can have a problem when they're idle and they're not doing anything. That's why they had the midnight basketball, because they knew where the kids were at midnight to playing basketball.
Thank you, Joe. Sheriff Mina?
Yeah, so this is something that's a passion of mine that I've been working on for quite some time. And, I say that because when I was in high school, I got into fights and the police were never called. So going back to my time as chief in Orlando, we increased our use of juvenile civil citations. And in all of Orange County, it's actually the numbers are going down. Since 2015, we have reduced our juvenile arrests by over 40% here in all of Orange County. So those numbers that were mentioned earlier about the Orange County Sheriff's Office, they're a result because of a policy that was already in place. So what I did, I went to those agencies, Pinellas and Miami-Dade and Broward and Brevard, and looked at some of their policies and how they're issuing juvenile civil citations, and made it one of my top priorities this year. I also changed the policy on juveniles who are 12 and under. Before a deputy goes to charge it or arrest that juvenile, they have to contact a lieutenant, a watch commander, for approval. So what we have seen, because of my philosophy and my policy changes, we have seen our juvenile decrease by half this year.
Okay. We have one final question coming in from Audrey Wheeler. With crimes and hate incidents against the LGBTQ community consistently not being reported and prosecuted, how do you plan to establish a safe and trusting environment for victims to come forward? Andrew?
Yeah, so I think when we talk about prosecution, right, so there's a lot of instances in domestic violence, not just in the LGBTQ community, but domestic violence where north of 90% of domestic violence cases, right, don't actually end up in court. They don't actually end up with formal charges because people either reconcile or they just don't want to participate anymore in the prosecution. The thing that I think we can do, particularly with the LGBTQ community, is making sure that we actually extend, that bridge and make sure that we're extending the olive branch, making sure that we have a relationship with members of that community, and we are allowing members of that community to report stuff on us. I know in the military, you have sort of 2 different types of reports. You can either report a closed report, which allows the institution to track the number of instances that are taking place, but it does not share your information. It doesn't actually go after and prosecute the person who you are accusing. And then there's the open one, which is like a normal criminal investigation where you're going to investigate and go after the accused in that particular case. I think what we need to do is make sure we're building that trusting relationship so that even when members of the LGBTQ community need to come in and file a report, but they don't want their business put out there and they don't care so much about filing and formalizing the criminal charges, we need to make sure that we build those relationships. So in times where we absolutely need the trust and members of the community want to move forward with those charges, we have that relationship in place, and I will do everything that I can to make sure that relationship is there when I'm sheriff.
Thank you, Andrew. Darryl?
Yeah, so I think this is a good question, and I think it goes back to the things that we're going through today as African Americans. You know, you really have to build relationships with the LGBT community and get them in front of people that they trust, or establish and employ people that they can trust so they feel comfortable in the same way that you would do with domestic violence victims and the same way you would do with rape victims and other, you know, people with sensitive crimes and issues. So, you know, if we can't establish a certain trusting relationship with the community, then it's going to continue to be very difficult for members of the LGBT community to report those crimes. And I think having a sheriff that has been a part of that community and knows and has a lot of connections within that community, I've had businesses with the LGBT community, so I think they will know that they have someone that they can trust, and they're going to be treated fairly when reporting those types of crimes. And we're going to do everything we can to make sure they're prosecuted. We're going to make sure our deputies respect those people within the community who come and report those crimes.
Thank you, Darryl. Eric?
Our U.S. Constitution provides us with certain protections under the law. And with that, and with that consideration, in our communities, regardless of your background and color or culture, our job is to serve and protect as law enforcement officers. And as we serve and protect, we are able to train our officers to understand cultures, to understand people, and understand to do their job according to the law. And with creation of new safe places and more people that understands the culture and why things happen, I believe that the relationship between the communities and cultures are going to bond even more when they know how to do their job, and they know that our policy says you are to respect all citizens. Then we're going to do a great job, and we're going to train, and any type of discrimination whatsoever will not be tolerated.
And Joe?
Yeah, you know, it applies to all the communities. The relationship between law enforcement and community has eroded, and that's because of what's going on nationwide. So we need to do a better job. For example, when I talk about Sasha Gardner, who was killed, a transgender woman back in July of 2018, they found out that a lot of the people, the transgender, they were afraid of the police, especially at whatever happened to that report, what they had to go through. So they're afraid to call the police. One of the things that we need to do is, of course, we need to have a robust community policing program, including an advocate that works for the sheriff's office, who's not in uniform, okay, who doesn't seem threatening, I should say, that somebody can go to. They can also be the person to help us to bridge that gap, to understand what the needs are. So we need to go to the LGBTQ community and listen to them and listen to the concerns, because we can't show up cold. Can't show up the one day that there's an incident and we're gonna do something, they don't know us. So we got to build better relationships, and you know what? They're valued members of our community. They all have jobs. Some of them are engineers. So we need to make sure that we bridge that gap.
Thank you, Joe. Sheriff Mina?
So again, going back to my time as chief, is the first agency in Central Florida to have an LGBTQ liaison program, implemented interaction transgender personnel in our community policy, and also created the Safe Place Initiative. So members of our LGBTQ community, when they felt threatened, they can go into those safe spaces and those businesses, call 911, or the people in that business would call 911. So I saw a gap when I went to the Orange County Sheriff's Office. I expanded the LGBTQ liaison program, put a manager in charge of that program, and brought my same policies over, the interaction with transgenders, actually policy on also if a deputy wants to transition as well as included in there. And then we made the Safe Place Initiative available for all businesses and all places in all of Orange County. And we actually had a resident reach out and said they wanted one for their group home. And of course we went right over there. And so I believe hate crimes against LGBTQ in our community is severely underreported. So we want members to know that they can come to us, it's going to be taken seriously. We're going to treat you the right way, and we are going to find the people who did this to you. And that's why, so when I was sheriff, I did host a meeting with some of our transgender community members to talk about issues, to talk about past incidents that happened, and to get better as a community.
At this time, we have reached the end of the debate. Right now, we are going to allot each of the candidates 1 minute for closing statements, beginning with Andrew Darling.
Thank you so much. Again, Rainbow Democrats, Brandon, Matthew, I'm sure Jack is still listening. Thank you guys for having us. The time for change is now. We've heard from the 3 candidates in this race that are career law enforcement officers. And being a law enforcement officer is an honorable profession, but to a hammer, everything is a nail. I am going to approach this process with a much more nuanced and a much more intentional approach to reform criminal justice from its very foundation. I am the only attorney in this race. I am actually the youngest one in this race. I just checked, Darryl. I am the youngest person in this race. I am the only person who is from here. I grew up here. Went to Oak Ridge High School, lived on OBT and Americana. I lived in places. We do not need more policing programs. We need more social programs. We need more affordable housing. We need more avenues to give somebody a hand up and not a hand out. Everything is not a crime. Everybody does not need to be punished for every single thing, to include municipal ordinances. I am the candidate for change. I am the reform candidate. Visit my website, andrewdarling.com. You can find me on social media at Reform Sheriff. Orange County, the time is now. Vote Andrew Darling for your next Orange County Sheriff.
Thank you, Andrew. Darryl?
Yeah, so I think the choices here are very clear. I think you got some great options, but I am the way to go. I'm the new direction. I think that I am the voice of the people. I do not believe a cop or a police officer is going to be the best choice in policing police. We see where that's gotten us, and we're in no better condition for it. As far as the LGBT community, I've been a part of that community for all my life, mostly. I've had businesses here in this community for 15 years, and I know what it takes. I'm college educated. I have 3 degrees. I'm very intelligent, and I will do what it takes to make sure that the people are safe. I'm not here to play games. I'm not here to talk to people in ways that, they want, I say what they want to hear. I'm going to give it to you straightforward, and I'm going to do what I say. So if you want a new direction, if you're ready for some change, and you want someone that you can believe in, vote Darryl Sheppard for Orange County Sheriff.
Thank you, Darryl. Eric?
My platform slogan is your community, your voice. It doesn't say your community being, it isolates anyone. It's your community, your voice. And when I began this campaign, it was from the heart. And I found that one day I typed up the fact that I wanted to be sheriff and the reason why I wanted to be sheriff. And then I happened to surf some websites and I say, okay, well, I guess there's this thing called plagiarism that comes around, and I guess they like my slogan. And my thing is, community policing is far more important and putting people and officers in the community, which is going to also bring about programs, whether it's from any other industry, such as the Magic or anyone else. And with that, I found that domestic violence is a serious concern, and elderly abuse as well as child abuse is very important. Those are some hidden figures that we are not addressing in our communities. And we live in a tourist area, a tourist Mecca area, and domestic terrorism is very important. And demilitarization, things of that nature, is not necessarily one of those things that we want to strongly consider, but we will look at it to see how it best fits our community. So go to Eric Mcintyre for Sheriff is my website, but the short version is voteforeric2020.com. You can see my training and experience, and you can know that I'm a Democrat and I'm in this for the people. And it's your community and it's your voice that matters.
Thank you, Eric. Joe?
Okay. Again, I want to thank the Rainbow Democrats for having us here and giving us an opportunity. Under my leadership, we won't be experimenting with unproven strategies and using feel-good words. I'm the only candidate that has a proven effective leadership history. I served my nation, I served my state, and I served my community honorable without any controversy. My campaign is a continuation of my 2018 campaign, Integrity Tour. Now it's Integrity Tour 2.0. And there's a reason for that. It's because my whole life I lived by integrity. When I walk the community, I'm the only one that's been knocking on doors and listening to the community, and they're telling me about what's going on, and I'm saying about the crime that's going on. The job of the sheriff is public safety, okay? And they want something done in their communities that they're seeing the violence and the crime that's going up. Yes, there are other opportunities to make sure that we can develop the relationships with the community, but they're telling me that enough is enough. And I think it's now time for new change because what's happening is you got the establishment supporting the establishment. All they do is pass the baton to one person. And if you notice, it's just the same.
You do?
Same name, different seat, and they just team 2020. Thank you.
Thank you. And we will wrap up with Sheriff Mina.
So I'm the only candidate who's been the chief executive of the two largest law enforcement agencies in Central Florida. Remember, the Orange County Sheriff's Office has over 2,500 personnel, $266 million budget. We need someone with the experience, and experience matters. I've testified before Congress. I've spoken at the White House when President Barack Obama was there on crime and police-related issues. I have served this community for 30 years. I've been knocking on doors for 30 years. I didn't wake up one day and just decide I wanted to be sheriff. I have been in this community building relationships. I have the cornerstones of my leadership have been trust, accountability, and transparency. And I care deeply about this community. I think it shows in the things that I've implemented here, the policies, new training, and holding our officers and deputies accountable. And I'm the only candidate who has done this job and has done it effectively. Crime is down here in Orange County by 9%. The community only continues to grow. So we need someone with experience, someone with the community connections that I have with our LGBTQ community, with our faith-based community, with all those throughout Orange County. Go to sheriffjohnmina.com, and Orange County voters, vote for me again for this re-election August 18th primary. Thank you.
All right. I do want to thank each of the Democratic candidates for participating in tonight's debate. At this time, I'm going to hand it over to Matthew Inman, our Vice President, who will administer our straw poll.
Hello, everybody. All right, so momentarily you'll be seeing the poll come up on your screen. Yeah, it's a straw poll, but there's no straws. So we're going to make it virtual this time. So it'll be popping up now.
Oh, we can't vote for ourselves?
Nice. Even I can't submit a vote. All right, we're waiting on a couple more people. We're at 15 out of the 19, almost there. All right, I'll give it a few more seconds for the remaining portion. If you guys can submit your poll, there's just about 2 or 3 more left. I'm going to close it in 10 seconds. I'm giving you guys a whole minute.
If anybody's on their telephone, they probably won't be able to participate.
I'm not able to see if they are. It looks like they're all on the computer, but I could be wrong. All right, the poll is closing. So here's the results. John Mina has 38% with 6 votes. Andrew Darling is right behind him with 5 at 31%. Joe Lopez with 25 with 4. Darryl Sheppard with 1 vote, 6%, and Eric did not receive any votes this evening. Thank you, everybody, and I'm going to hand it back to Brandon Nelson.
Right, well, that concludes this evening's event. Thank you once again to the Orange County Sheriff's candidates, and thank you everybody for participating and listening in, and we hope that you make an informed decision on the August 18th primary election. Thank you very much, guys. Have a great night.
Thank you.
Bye,
Take care,
everyone.
Rainbow Democrats.
All right, bye-bye.
Thank you.